round.
Of course.
And I'll explain our plan for today. Okay. We're going to talk about clothes, the boundaries of Chokot HaGoyim. Our discussion today is based, I'd say, divided into two sections. The first part of our discussion is talking about Jewish clothing and non-Jewish clothing. Is there such a thing as Jewish clothing and non-Jewish clothing? Meaning, are there clothes that as a Jew I shouldn't be wearing? You know, like that's the first question, between Jewish and non-Jewish. And then the second question that we're going to be talking about is men wearing women's clothing and women wearing men's clothing. Now, what would be some of the halachot concerning, can we have unisex clothing? You know, is there clothing that men and women can wear? That's really the two sections of our discussion today. And the reason why we are talking about this topic this particular week is because the basis of this discussion happens to be based on psukim from this week's Parashat Acharei Mot and Parashat Kedoshim. So we're going to start our discussion by looking at the psukim. After we look at the psukim, which are the basis of the idea of Chokot HaGoyim, and then the Shulchan Aruch expands Chokot HaGoyim to include the idea of clothing, like which clothing should we be wearing, and which clothing, Shalom Aleichem, which clothing I should be wearing, which clothing I should not be wearing. We're going to look to get down to Halakha L'Maaseh. What's appropriate, what's not appropriate. And then after the first part, where we speak about, really Jewish clothing and non-Jewish clothing, after we speak about that, then the second part is going to be about men's clothing and women's clothing. I'm going to start, actually, if you go at the back, at the bottom of the second page, there's a picture. Can you see the picture? So this is a picture from the 1920s in America. And what's happened is the Jews of Europe have emigrated to America. That's like Ellis Island, all these, the Jews that moved to the Lower East Side of New York, and they probably went to other places as well. I'm not a big expert. But if you have a look, there is a gentleman over here wearing all black. He is obviously a Jew who's arrived from Poland. And you have a Jew, who looked entirely different to him. The guy next to him, the guy from Poland is bearded. The guy who is next to him is not bearded, and he is the bearded Polish Jew is being invited to enter and integrate. Come and join us. Within the American community. If you look behind them, there are two. I guess they are Americans dressed in very, sort of a 1920s American clothing, looking at this Polish Jew. So the question is, what do I do? Can I take off my hat and put on a baseball cap in order to integrate with the world around me? Is that Chokot HaGoyim? Is that not Chokot HaGoyim? Now, to what extent can I decide what to wear or what not to wear with the purpose of integrating into general society? That is a question. Anyone with any comments before we start?
The Yiddish, there is...
Can you read it?
Mechaben farzai a heimgebot, which from what I understand means we've bought you a home.
Yeah, we've made you a home. We've made you a home. Exactly. Very good. When did you learn Yiddish?
In university. I took some Yiddish classes.
Oh, you mentioned... Yeah. That is amazing. Exactly, yeah. We made you a home, meaning you're no longer a European Jew, you're now an American Jew, and let's integrate. So the question is, what are the boundaries of that integration? What's acceptable? What's good? What's not good? Of course, there's a topic, you can talk about it for a long, long time. Okay, So we're going to look at two psukim, one pasuk from Parashat Achrei Mot, and then the second pasuk from Parashat Kedoshim. Both of them, we're reading both of these parashot in this week, and we'll start with source number 1. So the Torah tells us, "K'ma'asei Eretz Mitzrayim, asher yashavtem ba," like the ways of the land of Egypt that you came from. Lo tasu, don't do like they did in Egypt. U'k'ma'asei Eretz Canaan, asher ani mevi etchem shama, lo tasu. And likewise, don't follow the people of Canaan, the land in which, the land you're about to enter. In other words, there's a culture that you left. Don't bring that culture with you. And there's a culture in Canaan. Do not integrate there either, meaning you are a unique people. Don't blend into don't bring where you came from, and don't integrate into where you're going to go to. Do you see that? This is a really very famous phrase. According to that, do not follow their statutes. Now, what we're going to discuss is the boundaries of that. That is a very, very broad statement. Moshe Rabbeinu never wore a white shirt. So, is this,
How do you know?
Oh, you're right. But I'm guessing it's certainly not buttoned down like mine. But I'm wearing that now. So what are the boundaries of it can't just be we are influenced by the fashion of the world around us. So we have to understand the boundaries of that's going to be challenge number 1. But then we go to pasuk, the second source. We read from chapter 18. We're now going to read from chapter 20 of Parashat Vayikra, now Parashat Kedoshim. Really a similar idea. If you want to have a fun activity, people, you will see much of Parashat Achrei Mot and Parashat Kedoshim. Not everything, but there's a lot of overlap, particularly in the second part of Parashat Achrei Mot. And you'll see an overlap between the second part of Achrei Mot and Parashat Kedoshim. And here's another example, really rephrasing a very similar idea, but in a different way. So in
Rabbi, just have to go, but thank you for the show.
Oh, such a joy to
Cohn
see you. Have a
too.
wonderful day. It's the Charabah to you.
See you soon, gentlemen.
The Hitchard.
Have a great show. See you tomorrow.
Okay. Lo telchu b'chukot HaGoy. Do not follow the way of the non-Jews. Asher ani mishalech mipnechem. Ki et kol ele asu v'akutz bam, because I'm repulsed. It's not something, it's not something I want. That is what God is telling us. So God seems to be telling us that I need to avoid following the ways of the non-Jews around me. Is that clear? But it's quite a broad statement and a bit worrying, because we do. We're very much integrated in the modern world. Okay. So we're going to go to the Shulchan Aruch, where the Shulchan Aruch really, refines, sort of limits. Or maybe he gives a more precise definition of what we're talking about, so we don't end up not doing anything that anyone else does. So we go to the Shulchan Aruch in source number 3. It says, "Ein olchim b'chukot ovdei kochavim." Do not follow the ways of ovdei kochavim. Now that is a very important point. Do not follow the ways of Ovdei Kochavim. Ovdei Kochavim is people who worship idols. It's not talking about non-Jews. It's talking about Ovdei Kochavim.
But we just had this in our Gemara. I was reading from my Gemara, and it said Ovdei Kochavim. And the rabbi said Goyim. I said, well, it says Ovdei Kochavim. He says, oh, yours is the censored version. So could it possibly be that Ovdei Kochavim is a censored... He's using it as a censored version of Goyim?
We'll keep reading. We'll see. No. No, here is more precise. You'll see it's Dafka of Ovdei Kochavim. But we'll keep reading and we'll see why. V'lo yilbash malbush hamiyuchad lahem. Kol ze eino asur ela b'davar she'nagu bo ha'ovdei kochavim l'shum pritzut. You follow? What I need to avoid is u'v'chukotehem lo telechu is really an extension of not following other religions. You follow? Is that clear? It's not about not integrating. It's about not following any religion other than ours. Exactly. The concern here is not about we may integrate in the world around us, but I may be drawn to a culture that is not mine. Is that clear to you? Okay, so what's forbidden is, do you see that? The Ovdei Kochavim L'Shum Pritzut, Kegon Shenagu Lilvosh Malbushim Adumim, these who wear red clothing. Fuhu Mabush Sarim V'Chadome, Lezeh Mimalbushei HaPritzut, O B'Dvar Shenagu L'Minak, L'Chok V'Ein Tam B'Dvar Te'ika L'Mech Hashpa Mishum, the Darkei HaEmori. There's Darkei HaEmori are the ways of the Emorites, which is similar to idol worship. It's a culture that we are keeping away from. It's antithetical to Jewish values. Sheyesh bo shemetz avodat kochavim me'avotehem, because really it links back to avodat kachorim. Aval davar shenoagu letoelet. However, if they do something because it's just a sensible thing to do. כגון שדרכן שכל מי שהוא רופא מומחה יש לו מבוש מיוחד שניכר בו שהוא רופא אומן מותר ללובשו. Let's say a doctor wears a doctor's uniform, so that a doctor's uniform wouldn't be a din of uvchukotehem lo telecho. There's a big difference between dressing up as a cardinal and dressing up as a doctor. You follow? Because dressing up as a cardinal has got religious overtones. I'm identifying as part of a religion that is not my own. But if I'm a nurse, I know we have a daughter, I had no idea about this, who's studying nursing. So in her nursing uniform, she has huge pockets. And the reason why they have huge pockets is because they're always carrying stuff around that they need to... And a chef, I'm sure a chef has got a uniform that is geared towards their job. There's no problem in if I'm wearing this particular item of clothing, because that's the most useful way to do whatever it is I need to do. You follow? It's the avodah zarah undertones that I'm avoiding. Is that clear to everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, those are the Shulchan Aruch, but we're going to keep going a little bit further. HaTorah asra kol minhag miyuchad lenimusei ovdei elilim shema yamshich hadavar achreihen k'motam v'chein nami gam hakodim nagu be'ezeh minhag she'ein lo bavo b'darkei hateva v'lo nitamet hanisayon ha'osek motan yesh po mishum darkei ha'emori. So, according to the Ran, commenting on the Gemara in Sanhedrin, writes, now look at this is very important. What's the problem? Shema yimshoch adam achareihem k'motam. That I might be drawn into that culture. Now, I might add, I think the Ran, perhaps, is adding something extra here. And I want to explain what he's saying, and then we go to the Tzemach Tzedek, which is Chabad. And I think what he's saying is, he's saying something very powerful. He's saying that when I wear clothing, the clothing that I wear because I identify within a particular subculture. You follow? Mm-hmm. There are people that dress this way or that way because they identify within a particular social class, within a particular group. If I'm wearing this clothing in order to identify with a like a group of people in the world who are not, not people who live with Jewish values, so then that would be a problem. Is that clear to you? Not just Chokot HaGoyim, but if I'm choosing to, I choose my clothing because I wish to identify with a particular subculture, and that subculture is not something that fits well with my Jewish identity, then it will be a problem to wear that clothing. You see, that's how the Ran is adding to what we read in the Shulchan Aruch. Now, I want to tell you something. Okay, once in the Shut Tzemach Tzedek. Now, the Shut Tzemach Tzedek was I'm not sure which one he was. One of the there were 7 Rebbes of Chabad. He's one of the Rebbes of Chabad. He's not number 1 and not number 7. Is he number 3?
I think so. I'm not positive.
Okay, you're amazing. Thank you. So the third one, now this is very, very, very interesting. He is very, very strict about this clothing. Okay, he says, Yesh, on the third line, he says, Yesh le'tzurim levushim hamiyuchadim lahem, to wear clothing that is part of the clothing of the non-Jewish world around me. And then he brings a source text for this. Va'avdil etchem min ha'amim. It's a pasuk in Parashat Kedoshim. I will separate you from the nations, meaning I will separate you from the nations in the clothing that you wear. And he connects it to the idea of Big Day Shabbat as well. You know, not only do I not wear certain clothing because I want to separate from a particular culture, but sometimes I choose to wear clothing because I want to identify in a particular culture. And even though he mentions this in one line, I think it's a very, very powerful idea to what extent the clothing that I wear have an impact on the way I behave. So, for example, if I wear a t-shirt and shorts, so then I behave in a different way to the way I behave when I'm wearing a suit and a tie.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason why I wear Big Day Shabbat, it's like the flip side of what we're saying. I'm saying you shouldn't wear the clothing that would cause me to identify in, subculture that's anti-Jewish. Likewise, when I choose to wear special clothing on Shabbat, that also focuses me in the correct atmosphere that I need to be in for Shabbat Kodesh. You follow? So my white shirt on Shabbat is the opposite of Uvuchukoteim lo telechon. I'm using my clothing to elevate me, as opposed to choosing clothing that might pull me away from my Judaism. Okay, that is the third Lubavitcher Rebbe. And now I want to tell you why this is such a beautiful thing to say. I want to tell you a little story. And then after the story, I'll pause, and if anyone's got any comments or questions, I'll be very grateful. But here's a quick story. When my wife and I, when we first got married, we lived in Golders Green, and we lived right next to a Jewish bakery, Carmeli. Now, in those days, probably not nowadays, the cool place for teenage Jewish kids to hang out on a Motzei Shabbat was this Carmeli bakery.
It's not anymore.
Isn't it? Where do they hang out now? Do you even know where Carmeli? Do you know where Carmeli is?
Yeah.
Golders Green Road.
Yeah.
Oh, Leo, it's such a joyous house of bricks.
It's right next to Jerusalem, the Golden.
Yeah, good. You're good. Exactly.
Yeah.
Spot on. So when my wife and I first got married, we lived right near there, and on a Motzei Shabbat, like hundreds of Jewish kids, it was open all night. Motzei Shabbat, hundreds of Jewish kids used to show up to hang out with their friends. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. It wasn't all 100% kosher. I mean, the food was kosher, but the kids, anyway, they were kids. But the reason why I want to tell you this story is because various kiruv organizations would come to speak to the kids. If God forbid there were drugs, to make sure they weren't getting involved in drugs. Whatever terrible things children might get up to. So the various kiruv organizations would come. There was only one kiruv organization that would come in their Big Day Shabbat. The Chabadnikim used to come wearing they have special clothing they wear for Shabbat. And they didn't dress down in order to meet these kids. Now, some of the other people, in order to make themselves more approachable to the kids, so they would take off their hat and put on like a baseball cap, take off their jacket and put on... No, but you're not... Yeah, it's a different world.
Yeah.
and they would take off their ties, whatever it is, change out of their Shabbat clothing to make themselves a little bit more approachable to these kids, in the hope they could have an impact on them. Now, when we would walk past her on a Motzei Shabbat, we observed that the Chabad rabbis were by far the most successful in having people talk to them, because they maintained their integrity. This is who I am, these are the clothes I wear. A little bit what the Tzemach Tzedek is saying over here. Their clothing is very much a tool with which I identify myself. I dress like this because I'm part of this community, or I dress like that because I'm part of that community. And it's very impressive. You can hear the Lubavitch like thinking of how important my clothing is in order to, to decide in what subsection of the world I identify myself. So we've seen in our first part, just to summarize, and then hear your questions. So we have clothing. We have clothing, the forbidden clothing, not to follow in their ways. It's talking about clothing that I choose to wear to identify as part of a subculture that is not Jewish. So if I wear clothing that's identified as, that like the Christian community wear, or the Muslim community can wear. So by wearing that clothing, I'm identifying part of a community that's not mine. So that's forbidden. Also a subculture that's anti-Jewish. I have no idea. If people go to a rock concert, they might wear clothing because they want to identify in this community or that community. That's also a bit of a problem because I'm wearing clothing to identify as part of a community that's not really a Jewish community. So that's one thing. Shalom Aleichem, what a joy to see you. Then you have another set of clothing, and that's like a uniform, and that's obviously fine. If I'm a chef, I wear clothing that is just the best, where, I'm just wearing the clothing that's most effective for my job. A nurse with their big, everyone's got, that's obviously no problem at all. And then we added the third part, even more than that, when we're talking about Shabbat clothing, that sometimes I wear clothing, and the clothing that I wear in order to identify, in order to feel Shabbat. If I were to go to shul on Friday night in shorts and t-shirt, it would be a very different experience if I went with a crisp white shirt. My Friday night experience will be a different experience. And therefore, not only what I shouldn't wear, but what I should wear as well. Okay, that's end of part one. Comments? Anyone got anything to say? Oh, Shalom Aleichem.
I used to work as a mashgiach kashrut.
Yeah.
And the requirement was to wear the suit and white shirt every day. So
where did you work?
In Prague.
Oh wow!
For
that's amazing.
That was many years ago. And so for Shabbat I would wear the blue shirt.
Oh, that's so cute.
Everyone was asking why I wear a blue shirt on Shabbat, but not to wear something special.
Oh, that's so great. That's such a sweet story.
But if you wear like the, so the question is, so if you wear every day you wear a black suit and white shirt, then what would be the difference on Shabbat?
That's a very good question. All white shirt wearers have a solution to that. So most white shirt wearers have white shirts that they only wear on Shabbat.
A designated special.
Well, let's say you buy a new white shirt, so then you wear it on Shabbat until it's like all the other ones, and then it joins the cycle of all the other ones, and you get the next white shirt. But normally people who have white shirts have a white shirt that they would only wear on Shabbat. That's my...
Well, but this is a little bit puzzling, I would say even contradictory in a way. As I learned, I don't know if I got this like right, but the way whatever you wear is a kind of a statement which is directed to the people surrounding you, to the environment. Let's put it that way, right? So if there is no such a difference, what kind of statement is that? If there is no difference between white shirt and white shirt, let's put it that way. So what kind of a statement is that?
Because they all look the same.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, but you have different materials, you have different
okay,
fabrics,
watch me in the
different cuts.
Watch me in the shul looking under magnifying glass. So this is the fabric for today.
You can tell somebody's wearing a very high quality shirt though, versus like something like this.
Okay, but
no, it's a good question. I've got a story that's not connected at all to what you said, but it's a little bit of a story. There's a very sweet story about the Rebbe of Rizhin, the Rizhiner Rebbe. Do you know the Rizhin Hasidim were they were multi-millionaires. He was treated like royalty. The Rizhiner Rebbe. He used to wear, like, his chariot was made out of solid gold. Every button on his shirt was made out of the most expensive. like his shirts cost hundreds of whatever they used, whatever currency they had. It was really he would travel like a king. He lived like a king. One time, it was in the middle of the winter, and the Rebbe, the Rishon Rebbe, was saying Kiddush Levana, like we did Kiddush Levana. He was saying Kiddush Levana on a Motzei Shabbat. And then, at the end of Kiddush Levana, he moves from where he was standing, and people see that on the ground where he was standing, there's blood. There's blood on the ground. He's got the most expensive boot in the world. Like, where did the blood come from? On the Rishon Rebbe's shoes. And the Hasidim noticed, perhaps for the first time, that even though he had the most expensive clothing in the world, his shoes didn't have any soles. And the reason why his shoes didn't have any soles is because for you need to see me as the Rebbe, so for your sake, I have to wear the fanciest clothes in the world. But for me, I need to know that I'm just Afar Va'efer, and therefore I don't have any soles in my shoes. You follow?
I follow with this again, but this is a kind of going further and refer to the first part of your shiur tonight. For the first No. It's like also a little bit puzzling here. I mean, on the one hand, it's again constructive because you for the sake of the other people, you wear like a fancy outfit and so. At the same time, you're proving the point completely different way, while your shoes have no soles.
The Rebbe story. First of all, Rebbe stories are hard to integrate into the lesson that we taught. That is true. But I wanted to answer your point, and that is that I know that I'm wearing a different shirt than the rest of the week. You follow what I'm saying? Like the people around me may notice, they may not notice, but I know that I'm wearing a shirt lichot Shabbat.
Yeah, and that's pretty much fine, and that's kind of like really. It makes sense, but otherwise this is contradictory to the idea of
contradictory is a bit of a harsh word. Can you use a different word?
It's like it goes completely to opposite direction. That was
even worse. Anyway, go on.
In a way, if we're saying that the beginning there's a statement, so do I need the statement? It's all.
I don't think you can avoid it.
Okay.
I think we met. Unfortunately, I mean, we live in a world that people, I think making a statement with your clothing is inevitable. Like whatever I wear, I don't think that's something that I can.
What's something completely neutral that nobody would judge you for? I don't think it exists. So.
Yeah, unfortunately.
That's the thing. It's not about just making opinions of someone else's clothes, right? On the one hand, on the other hand, you want to give a signal of something. Yeah, that's the importance of Shabbat, for example, or whatsoever. You name it. Yeah. So on the one hand, you're supposed to give the send the message. On the other hand, you're not supposed to send the message.
Yeah, but I think the Ikar is not sending the message. The Ikar is changing your attitude. Like the clothes are changing you to be in the mindset of Shabbat. If other people see it, that's good as well. But that's not the Ikar, as far as I understand.
Excellent. Good. That was the original story, fits into that model. Excellent, thank you. Now we're gonna. If you remember, we started by looking at the picture of the guy who was wearing, the Polish Jew. So Rav Moshe Feinstein, as some of you may well know, was a rabbi who moved from Russia to America. He literally made that journey from Europe to America. In fact, he moved and he settled in the Lower East Side of New York. So this question of, the clothing that I wore in Europe and now the clothing that I'm going to wear in America. So to what extent am I allowed to change my clothing as I integrate in a new society? You hear the question? Okay. So Rav Moshe Feinstein was asked that question. Let's read what he says. Source number 6. B'inyan hamalbushim sheb'medina zo, America. What about the clothing in this country, America, New York specifically? She'ein chaluk bein Yisraelim le'nochrim. אם מחויבים בני פולין שבאו לפה, וגם הנולדים מהם בפה, ללבוש מהן המלבושים שהיו נוהגים בפולין מצד האיסור, זה מלבושי נוכרים, אף שהאב כבר שינה בבואו לפה, היה זה באיסור שנשאר האיסור. So the question is, I noticed that in the Jewish community in the United States of America, people dress like Americans. I have clothing that identified me as part of the Polish Jewish community. So when I moved from Poland to America, this is tragic because he's writing, the questions are being asked by Jews in the 1920s. Unfortunately, in the 1940s, they were unable to ask this question. So when they were coming in the 1920s, they were asking, can I take off can I change my clothing? Put away the Jewish clothing in Poland and wear the American clothing in New York.
It's kind of funny, right? To say Jewish clothing in Poland, the whole shita of Polish Hasidim was to wear Goyish clothing.
Oh, you're right.
And it comes from a pretty impure place as well. It comes from the Frankists and the 7th.
You're right. So the truth is, this whole the whole idea of like wearing the Polish the Polish clothing, it all comes from it was really the beginning of emancipation, and the Khatam Sofer, Rav Chaim Moshe Sofer, who saw that the ghetto walls were coming down, and then every aspect of Jewish life before the ghetto walls came down, sort of in order to rebuild the ghettos, they sort of maintained the lifestyle and the clothing that was unique to the Jewish community. They continued wearing that clothing even even after the integration of the Jewish community, which is how many people are still today wearing the clothing that would be associated with 18th century Poland. However, Rav Moshe Weinstein says, Pashut, now look at this, his words are very strong. Ein shum shemetz isur. There is absolutely nothing wrong with it. That's like the neutral. There are clothing that just people wear. That's the regular clothing here. Even though the non-Jews around here also wear this clothing, it's not specifically non-Jewish clothing. You follow? I'm not choosing to identify in a subculture. This is, if you go to the big department stores, this is what the shirts look like in this department store. That's what people wear. He says this word is very strong. Ein shum shemetz isur means there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Ein bahem chashash shemetz akum v'nichush v'gam lo davar tamur ela lenoi v'chadom. You're only doing it in order to for comfort and for other reasons, but there's absolutely no prohibition in changing as you move from one country to another, changing your clothing. I'll just tell you a very quick story on that about moving from one country to another. When I grew up in London, we lived right next door to a very Hasidish shtibel, and there was a guy, I can't even remember his name now, his guy who was about my age, and on Shabbat, because he was part of this Hasidish shtibel, he would wear a hat and a jacket and a tie. He would dress up, like a very fancy schmancy when it came to Shabbat. And then when he came to Israel, he went to study at Merkaz Harav. Now I, for a little while, went to study at Merkaz Harav. And when I saw him in Merkaz Harav, he'd taken off his hat and his jacket and his tie, and he was wearing, like we all do, like wearing a smart white shirt for Shabbat. So I asked him, such a chutzpah, like what happened to the hat and jacket? And he said such a sweet thing, because we're not talking about Poland to America, we're talking about Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael. So he said, when a Jew is in Chutz La'aretz, so you're a guest. So when you're a guest, you have to dress up. But in the land of Israel, we're at home. This is the lounge. So you have a difference. This is how you dress when you're on the street, and this is how you dress when you're in your lounge. So the land of Israel, the city of Jerusalem, is our lounge. So this is how we dress here. Anyway, okay. So that's Rav Moshe Feinstein, absolutely no problem at all. Now Rav Ovadia Yosef also writes the same thing. His only concern is the issue of tzniut. Meaning, I know this is true of our daughters in England. Leads us nicely to our next topic as well. Sometimes Jewish clothing is observable as Jewish clothing just because it it adheres to the laws of tzniut. I know for our children, every once in a while we would go to England, like for a family holiday, and sometimes, well, really it wasn't a holiday; it was to visit our family. You know, the family who lived in England. And when our kinderlach were little, we could buy them clothing in England, and it was, like stuff we used to remember. But then as our children got older, the possibility of buying them clothing, particularly for the girls, became more and more difficult, because just the what's available in the shops and our level of our requirements of tzniut are not synchronized with one another. So on the one hand, Rav Moshe Feinstein writes that when you move to a new country, there's no problem in wearing, dressing as the people in that country dress. But Rav Ovadia Yosef adds a footnote to that and says, we're only talking about dress that adheres to our requirements of modest clothing, of tzniut. So if I'm moving to a country where the default way of dressing does not adhere to the tzniut requirements within the Jewish community, so then I would be wearing clothing that is different to the people around me, just because the local clothes do not fulfill our basic principles of tzniut. So is everything clear until now? We can summarize with, I think, 4 points. The first point is the problem of Chokot HaGoyim is only when I'm wearing clothing that is being worn in order to identify within a subculture that is anti-Jewish. Right, so I'm wearing clothing that is associated with a religion other than mine, or that is associated with a culture that is antithetical to my Jewish values. So that's the problem of Chokot HaGoyim, is wearing clothing with which I would identify as part of a community that is not, does not fit in well with my Jewish values. That's point number 1. Point number 2, there's nothing intrinsically Jewish about, some clothing and other clothing. When Jews have moved from country to country, they have taken on the clothing of that country. If you see a Bigdei Shabbat of the Jews from Morocco, it's very different to the Bigdei Shabbat of the Jews from Russia. And the Bigdei Shabbat of Jews from Russia are very different from, as you understand, each country has its clothing, and there's nothing wrong, as Rav Moshe Feinstein points out, there's nothing wrong with wearing clothing that is part of what people tend to wear in that place. That's point number 2. Point number 3 is uniforms. There's no problem in Chokot HaGoyim of wearing uniforms. Uniforms are normally designed for their utility. So by me choosing to wear this particular item for that job, I'm wearing this item of clothing because it's just the most effective way to, wear clothing and then perform my job in an effective way. That's point number 3. Point number 4 was Rav Ovadia Yosef's point, and that is a point of tzniut. That putting everything that we said aside for a minute, if the local fashion does not adhere to the basic principles of dressing modestly for men and for women, if the clothing on the street does not adhere to the laws of tzniut, so then we as religious Jews, we would have to choose clothing that is different to the general society, because tzniut is something that is important to us. Okay, is that clear? Those are the 4 points that come out of part 1. Joy, Ah, how you doing, Chaim?
Yes. May I ask a question?
It'll be an
regarding that?
honor.
So if for the requirements, if the requirement is to wear elegant, to be elegant,
Yeah,
and to be wear it should be tsanua,
yeah.
and then it should it be clean as well?
So that's another separate point. Talmidecha, we need to be dignified.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't speak about this at all now, but the Gemara talks about Talmid Chacham with a stain on their, it's a Chilul Hashem, to walk around.
And also there was a story I remember I read about the Chachamei Lublin, and they had particular requirements about how the Talmidim are just presenting themselves
Oh, really?
outside. Yeah,
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
they should be all neat, complete.
Yeah, sometimes it's not always possible, but to the best, whatever we can do.
And so
Yeah.
there is no a standard requirement for to be or standard model how to be elegant.
No.
It's always matter of context. Yes.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Especially when you enter in the Borough Park to the Stiblach, and you
Yeah,
feel yourself
Yosef.
in black and white.
But I just wanted to ask about the women wearing red dresses.
Oh, good timing. Let's go to our second part 2 that we're going to go through very quickly. Is about men wearing women's clothing and women wearing men's clothing. So this red business is mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch. We looked at it in source number 3. Red was associated as the color of royalty, and Jews would not wear red because it was a color of royalty. Nowadays, I don't think that is something that we adhere to. I'll just tell you a little joke. It's not a joke. No, because talking about red clothing. So I once heard a lovely shir by a rabbi called Rav Osher Weiss. You heard of Rav Osher Weiss?
Yeah.
So Rav Osher Weiss once gave a shiur about preparing for Yom Tov. And he said when you prepare for Yom Tov, so women, it says that the men are happy through eating meat and wine. That's what makes men happy. And women get happy when you buy them new clothing. And the Rambam in Hilchot Yom Tov says women should have colourful clothing. It says begadim tzivoni, I don't know exactly what, tzivonim. You like colourful clothing. So there was this Kollel guy, and he wanted to buy his wife a dress for Rosh Hashanah, for Yom Tov, I don't know, one of the HaGoyim. I think it's Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot. Anyway, he wanted to buy his wife a dress for Pesach, and the dress that she chose was black and white. But the Rambam says it has to be colourful. So he didn't know what to do, because on the one hand, the Rambam says he has to buy his wife a colourful dress, but on the other hand, the wife wants his black and white dress. No, when you mentioned, anyway, didn't know how he followed, so he asked Rav Moshe, how should he paskin? Should he follow the Rambam, follow his wife? You hear the problem? Don't feel you're fully empathetic to this dilemma.
I take it from the physical. I think the white is representing all the colors together.
Oh, clever. Good one. Very good. Thank you.
Good.
You're reading the shitta of the wife into the Rambam.
Yeah.
That's, and then solving the problems. Okay, excellent. Okay.
Let's get her a tie-dye t-shirt so she can wear it underneath and fulfill all opinions.
Very good. Yes. Oh, Yisrael, how are you doing?
Yeah. A question about not about the different women and men, about some people, the business, the job. For example, the fashion designer, some people always the jacket. Some people designer with a special clothes. But I don't know the dressing is a woman and designer no great really how to this one point. Another point, some people for business guy they go to other country, they will conceal the chichi and make the hair the cover, conceal the keeper.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's good.
To cover your kippah, and why would that? What do you mean?
Because some people, the business meeting with the other country.
Oh, that's a separate question.
Oh.
That's a separate question. Can you take off your kippah for a? Or the truth is, with people, that's a very very excellent question. When am I allowed to remove my kippah? When do I have to make sure it's on? That's not part of our question. What was the first question about the tailor? I go to a tailor and they...
No, does he think designer clothes are... It's kind of... You can't tell if they're like for women or for men. They're very fancy, embroidered, something like that.
Okay. So let's go there. Good question. So the Torah is quite explicit about this. This is in source number 8. Lo yekli gever al isha v'lo yabash gever simlat isha. Men are not allowed to wear women's clothing. Women are not allowed to wear men's clothing. Now, if you have a look, we're going to look very quickly at the Sefer HaChinuch. Sefer HaChinuch goes through all of the 630 mitzvot and explains the rationale for each one. What's wrong? Why should men not wear women's clothing? Or why should women not wear men's clothing? So he says, Mishora mitzvah leharchik me'umanatenu hakdusha davar erva v'chol inyan v'chol tzad sheyeh hakishalon bo'oto davar hamatzui mitocho v'chi'inyan she'amru zichron ha'melacha al derech mashal. Okay, one second, let me just... Basically, he says, I'm going to go to the third line from the bottom. Let me summarize what he says in the first part, then I'll read it from the third line to the bottom. Really, the reason why men shouldn't wear women's clothing and women shouldn't wear men's clothing is so that everybody should know who's a man and who's a woman. It is an extension of the din of erva, like to prevent promiscuity. So it should be clear when you see somebody, it should be very clear who they are. So the first reason why men should look like men and women should look like women is in order to prevent promiscuity. But then he continues and he says, "L'harchik kol inyan avodah zarah, she'darkan shel avodah zarah hi bekach." And he says there's also an element of avodah zarah, that apparently in some avodah zarah, the part of the service of the avodah zarah is for men to be wearing women's clothing, women to be wearing men's clothing. But the primary concern, according to the Sefer HaChinuch, is to prevent confusion. That we're worried, God forbid, of promiscuity. And promiscuity may happen when, I can't tell, is that a man or is that a woman, you look too much at somebody, like when somebody draws attention. So that's really what we want to avoid. Those are the words of the Sefer HaChinuch, not a... Okay, that's the Sefer HaChinuch. How's that translated into halakha? See how it's translated into halakha? We see in the Shulchan Aruch, in Yoredea, says like this. So a woman shouldn't wear like clothing that a man normally wears, like a man's hat, or armor, like men wear armor, and she shouldn't shave her head like men shave their heads. Men shouldn't wear like the colors that, like a feminine clothing. You shouldn't wear clothing that only women wear. It's not just your whole outfit.